Good afternoon, Abby and Karla. Just wanted to say hi since I noticed both of you were there. I'll be hosting the event, which doesn't mean a whole lot, just means I'll kind of, wait for people to get in and then I'll very quickly introduce you all, more let you introduce yourself. But very glad to have you here. I'm interested in hearing about cultural competency and some of what y'all are doing at CMC. I don't get a chance to hear about that often, so it's fantastic.
Thanks for helping us. We're excited to be here.
Wonderful. So we got about 5 minutes, so y'all do whatever you need, getting things set up, talking things through, working on your own. Just let me know if you need anything. I'll pop back on about 12:45.
Could I share my screen? We have a PowerPoint, of course.
You should see if you can do that already. If not, I can.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh. Okay, well, I didn't do that, so let's change that. Okay, try it now.
Okay.
Good.
You can see that okay?
It says it started screen sharing, but it's not showing anything. It's just a black screen with those words on it.
Let me stop the sharing and I'll do it again.
Okay.
Good now? Okay.
There we go. Now we look good.
Yay.
For those just joining, we'll give it a few minutes here. People are coming back from lunch, so I may just give it an extra couple of minutes to let people get to the rooms. Okay, I'm going to give it one more minute here and then we'll get started and other people can just kind of come on in. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get things started. So thank you all for joining us on this session. I'm not going to waste any time whatsoever. I'm just going to very quickly introduce from CMC. We have Abby Crew and Karla Hardesty, and they will let you know about implementing a cultural competency graduation requirement at CMC from inception to assessment. Thank you so much. Take it away, y'all.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate time on a Friday afternoon. I'm Karla Hardesty, Colorado Mountain College's Associate Dean of Planning, Assessment, and Improvement. And I'll let Abby introduce herself.
Hey everyone, I'm Abby Crew. I'm an adjunct faculty and Assistant Dean of Academic Planning, Assessment and Improvement, Curriculum Review, and Innovation.
We'll get started here with a quick overview of Colorado Mountain College for those of you who aren't familiar with our institution. We are a recently designated Hispanic serving institution with a dual mission. We have certificate programs, bachelor's degrees, and associate degrees. That's what dual mission means. We have 11 campuses in central and western Colorado in the Rocky Mountains. We offer 7 bachelor's degrees, 54 associate's degrees, 77 certificates, and we have about 15,000 students annually, but 4,900 of those are considered full-time degree or certificate seeking. And we point out that we have 11 campuses because that presents a lot of challenges when we're trying to work on initiatives such as a cultural competency graduation requirement or have standards with assessment and such. So we wanted to share our story and hopefully some of you who also maybe have multiple campuses can see how we can work through some of the challenges that that sort of a setup presents. And in practicing good assessment, we have to have a presentation objective or outcome here. So in this presentation, we will share our successes and challenges defining, implementing, and assessing a graduation requirement centered around equity and inclusion. I'll turn it over to Abby for an overview of what we're here today to talk about.
Thanks, Karla. And thanks everyone for joining us. I'm interested in hearing from our participants too, so we have time at the end, maybe where you are in your journey. Perhaps your college is considering a cultural competency graduation requirement, and we'd love to not only offer our experience working through some growing pains, if you will, but also hear from you and kind of collaborate and pool our resources. So inspired by Luke Wood's keynote address this morning of like, it's not enough to put a syllabus diversity statement and check the box and say, we're done. I keep hearing his words, we can do better, we can do better, we can do better. So in 2016, Colorado Mountain College decided that a cultural competency graduation requirement was important enough to require, and that's great, and we could do better. And so what we realized, and again, maybe some of you all have experienced this, it was a little cart before the horse. And in 2016, I was a department chair for social and behavioral sciences, and there was a group of individuals who were looking through the course descriptions in CCCS, and from those course descriptions determined which courses would be on the cultural competency graduation requirement list. Well, this it was phase one, right? It was a way to approach. It was our inroad into this graduation requirement, and we realized we could do better. So at that point, we had an assessment director who was having us map our course learning outcomes to our institutional learning outcomes. And it was a prime moment to pull what we had at the time was an institutional learning outcome around global and diversity learning and see which courses mapped up to those. And what we saw was that none of the courses, well, very few of the courses that were on the cultural competency list actually mapped up to that institutional learning outcome for global and diversity learning. So there was an opportunity for improvement here, right? And so we started there. And so what we wanted to do, it was myself and another department chair in social and behavioral sciences. We really wanted to come up with a system for codifying course inclusion. And what this system, it was a can of worms that needed to be open, but what was a simple summer project turned into a 2-year endeavor to do better. And really, it's a good thing. It just takes some time and multiple stakeholders. So what we did, we were very intentional about the definition of what is cultural competency, like what does CMC see as cultural competency? And there's certainly arguments around even calling it cultural competency. So we engaged in that dialogue. And we were very careful to align what this institutional learning outcome about global and diversity learning looked like in relationship to the cultural competency definition. And so those words really matched up. We were very intentional about that. All of those changes went through curriculum committee, academic council, college council, all the various stakeholders. And so that brought us to 2020, right? Like quick 2-year process there. So in 2020, we had this course application form that faculty could fill out. And what we were asking them to do was to align 2 course learning outcomes to 2 of the subsets of the institutional learning outcomes for global and diversity learning. And we'll show you what those look like. So part of the dialogue around this was that the course could not be tied to an instructor, right? We have 31 sections of English 121, and some of them absolutely are culturally competent courses and some of them are not, but we have faculty that come and go. 70% of our classes are taught by adjuncts. We really needed a system that tied this designation of cultural competency course to the course itself and not to the faculty. So that's why we really were leveraging those course learning outcomes. So in 2021, 31 courses were approved, went into the catalog, 2021-2022 catalog. And then we had the task of holding ourselves accountable. Like on this list of 31 different courses, are students actually learning what we're hoping that they learn? So we created an assessment protocol to kind of pull that data and see and hold ourselves accountable. Are the students learning what we think that they're learning? And is this the right 31 course list, or should we amend it again? Like, how can we constantly do better? It's an iterative process. So we'll conclude with what the pilot courses found for us in this assessment protocol and our successes and improvements for identifying student learning, which kind of brings us to this moment. So again, quick 4-year trajectory here. It's actually like 6 years if we go back all the way to 2016. But hopefully some of our growing pains can inform the evolution of what's happening in your institution. And we'd love to hear from you too, if you all are going through some of these growing pains similarly. So as I said, the cultural competency course catalog definition really emphasizes this notion of power, privilege, and marginalization. We really wanted this, if we're going to call it cultural competency, we don't believe there is an endpoint, like one is not competent, but we thought that this examination of power, privilege, and marginalization was essential to digging into this definition and to the competency we want our students to understand. It's not like a survey of what I say often in my courses is add women and stir. Like that's not what we want to do here. It's not enough to just talk about diversity, right? Like we need to dig in and really examine systems of power, privilege, and marginalization. So we were super intentional about that, and we did get some pushback, and we continue to get pushback, but it stands in the catalog. So here we are. And Karla, next slide. You can see that the 5 subsets of our institutional learning outcome mirror the language in that course catalog definition. Again, power, privilege, and marginalization as a process and a condition. We wanted in these 5 subsets to appeal to the wide variety of courses that could meet this definition. So we thought through, like, in a Spanish course, what could this look like? What skill set would demonstrate this? In a sociology course, in an anthropology course, in an English course. So we're really looking cross-disciplinary objectives here and being very strategic with our language so that these 5 subsets could meet objectives in the course learning outcomes across a variety of courses. So I'd like to pause here and see if anyone has questions or comments just about kind of the first 5 years of this process, if you will. So this has taken us up to 2022, and we'll take you through kind of the next phase, if you will, but I'd love to pause and see if we can answer any questions or clear anything up for anyone, or if anyone wants to share their journey, if their institution is embarking on a similar trajectory here. Feel free to unmute or pop it in the chat.
Hi, this is Quill from Arapahoe Community College. Sorry, let me get my video on really quick since I'm talking.
You're good. You can keep it off if you want. It's on. I had dental work this morning, so I was keeping mine off because I felt like I was drooling. So you're welcome here with or without your video.
Okay. Well, I actually can't find my video button. So anyway, sorry. Oh, there we go. Sorry, there it is. So I had actually a question about a 6.4 objective about power and privilege. So do you all actually have a power and privilege course? Is it called that? Is there more than one course? Yeah.
Great question. I think we don't have one course, and that was one part of the evolution of this graduation requirement was, should there be one course? And we talked about it, and it ultimately was not the path we took moving forward. I personally teach a sociology of diversity class, which is probably the closest one would come to this 6.4. But I think your question might be like, so how do you evaluate this? And I'll show you the rubric we use to evaluate that if that's where you're going. But no, the quick answer is we don't have one course that would meet 6.4. But we have a number of courses that do assess 6.4, and we'll show you that data.
I don't know if you're going to talk about it as you're talking about the rubrics, but I'm really curious to know what that rubric development process looked like, who was engaged, how long. I think in the timeline, we tend to get stuck sometimes on the rubric piece.
Great question. We leverage our experts. We use CDHE, which used AAC and U. There's no better stuff out there, quite honestly. And the folks who were involved were 3 faculty members. And it was vetted through the rest of the Cultural Competency Subcommittee, which is largely faculty members. We have a registrar, we have 2 deans, and the rest are faculty. Great question. There's another question in the chat too. You may be planning to answer this already, but I'd be interested to hear about the courses that have been approved and which your team has found most effective and appealing to students. We'll get to that. We'll show you. Yes, women's studies, ethnic studies, along with sociology. Absolutely, Professor Lehman.
This is a great segue actually to our next slide. And I do want to mention in our definition development and defining the outcomes that are listed here on this slide, there was a strong shared governance process so that faculty were heavily involved in what this looked like and in shaping it. And what we came up with in the course application process that Abby described earlier was 31 classes that had the cultural competency designation. And you can see we crossed a variety of disciplines so that students had a lot of choices in meeting this graduation requirement. And we based it on the student learning outcomes as Abby described, not the faculty. Although faculty were the ones who were involved and submitted the applications for the courses. Is that right, Abby? Because I wasn't involved in that. Faculty submitted the applications for the courses to have this designation of cultural competency, but it wasn't based on personalities or faculty. It was based on those institutional student learning outcomes. So that outcomes piece was really important to have the definition and then the learning outcomes around cultural competency. So we'd have that clearly defined in the courses as well. So this is our list of the 31 classes. Most of them are part of the guaranteed transfer GT Pathways program that CDAG administers, so they're transferable across the state, even though the cultural competency piece is a graduation requirement and not necessarily designated in the GT definition. Any questions or comments on our course list here? Women and social action is missing, and Abby teaches a women's studies class, so maybe.
So we don't, the only women's studies class we have at Colorado Mountain College is the intro class. So we don't have the women in social action in our course catalog.
I'm wondering about CTE certificates. Do they all, like, did they revise their curriculum to include one of these courses? Say the phlebotomists of the world, or the, I don't know.
So presently the certificate programs do not all of them need the cultural competency graduation requirement. So it's a great question, and what the initial definition in the catalog is, most of our associates and bachelor's programs require the cultural competency courses. I don't believe that, it's not necessarily for the certificates, but the certificate programs themselves can opt in if they want. They have not yet. And, we're doing work at the course level and at the curriculum level simultaneously. So it's not to say that they aren't getting cultural competency elements and teaching components of 6.1 through 6.5 in their courses. But those courses are not designated as cultural competency courses because of those learning objectives, right? Does that make sense? Great questions. Couple more questions coming up. Some of our courses are done in Spanish language. The Spanish courses are taught in Spanish language. The other courses are not, and we've had this conversation actually with our Vice President of Academic Affairs, and at this juncture, it has not progressed, but I think that there's an opportunity there. Absolutely, there's an opportunity there. And SUS 331, Cultural and Place-Based Equity, is for our sustainability program. It's a unique course for Colorado Mountain College. It is not part of CCCS. Other questions? Okay.
I think you answered most of those. Thanks, Abby, and thank you for the great questions. This is wonderful. So some of you have asked about the rubrics and how we map these. So we, as Abby described, we use the value rubrics from AAC&U, and we, for our 15 faculty that Abby described in the timeline, so we had these 31 classes, and from there 15 courses were piloted this past fall semester, and each faculty was in charge of mapping their modules to the competencies and this institutional learning outcome, and then having the activities listed in their plan and what assessments they would do. So this is just an example of what that mapping looked like to embed assessment into this. I don't know, Abby, if you want to add to it, especially since you are a faculty member who participated in the pilot.
Rachel, you'll love this. It's from the women's studies class. And so this was just a suggestion. It was a teaching tool. And I will say we haven't said it yet, but there was a tremendous amount of professional development that went into training the faculty on how to apply their courses for the cultural competency designation. There were YouTube videos, there were written instructions, there were PowerPoints, there's a Canvas shell for that. So we really did a lot of work coaching the faculty as to how to apply for their course inclusion, what we were looking for, and then, how to pull the data on the back end that we really want to see. So this is one tool that we offer for faculty to think through what assessment they already have for the course learning outcome that maps up the institutional learning outcome that we can pull for our assessment data. So every faculty was able to use assessments that they already had in their course. There was not a common assessment. There was not a standardized assessment protocol at all. And what was really lovely about the protocol that we rolled out was that it's leveraging Canvas. So we'll show you in the next slide, Karla, if you will. So we used the Canvas, the rubric, the Canvas grading tools in rubric, the rubric in Canvas. And we used the CDHE Global Diversity Learning rubric, and we aligned the ISLO 6.1, so the question you had before, with the build self-awareness, demonstrate their own attitudes. That's part of CDHE, and these are from the AAC and U rubrics, right? So a lot of minds went into creating this. It was not just us in isolation, and it was vetted by faculty. So faculty have the ability to put this rubric just with like a +1 or like a click of a button onto their assignment already in Canvas, and then assess the activity that the student is submitting. And faculty can even remove all points and make it ungraded for the student if they don't want to change their grading schema, and that's fine. We can still pull 4, 3, 2, 1. In the next slide, I think it shows the reporting and what that looks like. So the dark green is a 4, the light green is a 3, and then 2 is the yellow. So we were able to export from Canvas the Learning Mastery Gradebook and see how the students were doing. And again, I think the real kind of the power of this assessment protocol is that faculty could use the assessment that they're already doing. No, CMC does not use D2L, we use Canvas. But faculty were able to use the assessments they already have and were able to load an auto-populated rubric into their assessments, and then we were able to pull the data on the back end. So it kind of got faculty to this point. It was awesome. And they're like, okay, now what? Enter Karla.
So I started at CMC in the middle of fall semester. So it was good timing with this project. Faculty were working on their assessments and collecting their assessment data. And then in November, Abby and I started working real closely together to figure out, okay, we've got this data, what are we going to do with it? And we'd gotten some feedback from faculty in my first few weeks that they hate assessment. It feels like box checking. And we quickly moved to this iterative improvement process with equity surrounding it. And not just that this ISLO is all about equity and DEI, being cultural competency. But we made sure that assessments were equitable and that equity was all throughout this assessment. And so we thought about the assessment cycle, starting with student learning outcomes, instruction, the assessment method, and the rubrics that were in our LMS. And then the next steps in the cycle was what we were really needing to move forward on. And that analysis of the data was really important. And then thinking about how are we going to collect this and have faculty report. And then most important part of assessment, in my opinion, is the improvement that can be made from all of this data collection and having students go through assignments and do assessment work so that we know where they're at with their learning. And so to make improvements from that was a place that we really had to get our faculty to think about. This is what assessment is about, not box checking to go, okay, yep, I did that assessment, done with that activity as a faculty responsibility. And so we developed a reporting process, and I will show you that on the next slide here, with reflective questions so that faculty could really put a narrative and think about the data that they were getting. So we developed an online form with these 4 questions. What information, evidence, data did you gather to inform about student learning for the outcomes you plan to assess? So they had selected those 5, yes, 6.1, 6.2, 6, those outcomes in our institutional student learning outcome 6. They selected the outcomes that they wanted to assess and thought about the evidence and data that they collected. And then the second question, what did they discover or learn from that data? How did it inform them? Third question, and this, I always tell them, this is the meat of assessment. What do you plan to do the same and differently based on your discoveries about your students and their learning? So this really made them think, okay, the data tells me I have gaps here. What can I do to close that gap or make sure that my students learn this based on the data? And then the fourth question, what support or resources do you need in order to make your plans happen? And so we put these 4 questions into an online form that we piloted with the faculty, in these 15 faculty in the cultural competency semester. And we will discuss some of the results and findings that we had from this. So Abby, I don't know if you want to talk about the results here. We had the back end results, and we found we had great quantitative data right away. Like we learned, oh, nobody in this semester actually assessed 6.5. Most everybody focused on 6.1. That's great. So now we know for this spring semester, we're having a few faculty or making sure that at least somebody is looking at and assessing 6.5, or we have a broader coverage of all the outcomes in the cultural competency ISLO. And then we also could see those qualitative answers as well. And Abby, I'll let you cover that.
So the qualitative answers were really kind of so validating that we're on the right path. So some of the faculty said 100% of my students performed at 3 or higher, 80 at right at 3, and 20% at 4. So students are learning what we're expecting them to learn. So that was validating. You know, often we think they are, but we don't really know. So we have the data to prove it right now. And another faculty said they were thrilled to see that the discussion mapped nicely to the ISLO and that it was a qualitative way to discover mastery. That one just kind of makes me laugh, like, because like, oh, look, we stumbled upon this. But no, really, I think that we're doing wonderful work in our class, and sometimes we don't actually know why it works so well. And so we're giving faculty the tools to be more intentional about replicating what works well in other areas, right? Like in other classes, maybe. So this faculty had it dialed in unbeknownst to them. So that was wonderful. So the question in the chat, how many of these courses would a student need to complete in order to fulfill the graduation requirement? Just one. So obviously that's not competency necessarily, it's exposure. And we talk about that, but it's a start. So faculty also said, you know, this typical struggle is to help students recognize the nuances of marginalization as a social process and to be able to articulate how those processes work in a detailed and systematic way. All of the students made significant progress in that regard. And I think that that's what's really important to me about that statement, is that we don't expect mastery in a 1 semester course, but we do expect progress. And this faculty comment really captured that. Like, they started in one spot, and by the time they finished, they may not have reached a 3 or a 4, but they moved from a 0 to a 2, right? And so that, I think that's important to capture as well. And finally, you know, it's as valuable to learn what is working as what is not working. So I learned that the assignment itself needs adjustment. Students describe many arrays of ethnic and standard foods in their lives, but they struggle to describe and or identify ethnocentrism in food events. And so this faculty learned that they were kind of expecting a lot from their students without without the necessary scaffolding in their assignment. And so the iterative practice of assessment is to improve upon that assignment in the future, and that improves upon student learning. So we really appreciate the vulnerability of the faculty to put themselves out there and be critical about their assessments and how we can all improve in this process, right? So it's certainly not punitive. It was encouraged and celebrated, like, oh, that didn't work, that's awesome. Let's try something else that will work. Right, cultural competency courses occur over a lifetime. Amen, sister. So our takeaways are that we actually had 100% participation, which if anyone's ever been a department chair and tried to get faculty to complete assessment protocols, it is hurting cats, and it's kind of worse. I have 3 small children, and they are more compliant than the adjunct faculty who won't comply, and the full-time faculty who don't necessarily think it's part of their contract. So 100% participation is like unprecedented. So woohoo. And I think honestly, a lot of that was the professional development, and again, the scaffolding of explaining to faculty not only how to do the protocol, but the value of it, like what it is not box checking. It really is professional development. It really is pedagogical improvement. It really is about improving student learning around cultural competency, which I think 100% of these faculty members would agree is important in their skill set, right? And important in what they bring into the classroom as well. So most faculty noted that their benchmarks were met, that they now have data-informed mastery achievement, right? It's not just like, I think my students know this, like we have the data to emphasize that and to demonstrate that. We also have evidence-based teaching improvements. And so the faculty, one of the questions was, where else could we have improved in the professional development, or what else do you need to know? How else can we support you? And all of the faculty who answered the question said that they felt supported. They had an abundance of emails from me, and I try really hard to give them just enough information and not too much, but I've already heard there's another email from Abby in my inbox. So I know that they get peppered from me a lot, but really it's to set everyone up for success here. And there was a deep appreciation of the collaboration and the professional development around this. That really, the comments emphasized that it was not box checking, it was not performative, it was authentic, and that's everything, right? Like that's why we do what we do. And that's not to say we didn't face some resistance along the way, and this is kind of where we'll open it up to some audience participation here. We certainly had challenges. We had challenges just coming up with the definition. We had many folks who felt that their lived experience, which is important, credentialed them with the academic expertise to be co-creators of the definition. And in an institution of higher education, credentialing does matter. So it was a complex conversation to navigate within power structures. The assessment protocol itself was challenged when assessment, faculty come out swinging to our new assessment director saying, hi, my name is X and I hate assessment, which really did happen. And we continue to face challenges with the ongoing oversight and who is part of this cultural competency committee, where it fits within curriculum committee, beyond curriculum committee, as a program, as a department. I mean, we're figuring it out. We're creating the path as we're walking it right at this very moment. And again, there's ongoing resistance to DEIB efforts, diversity, equity, inclusivity, and belonging. And just this past semester, we had like the definition, and in very public forums, faculty saying, quote, the definition goes too far, emphasizing power, privilege, and marginalization, and isn't it just enough to talk about diversity? So these are the challenges that we're hearing. And one thing that made me feel better recently, we were at the AAC&U conference, and they said, if you are not experiencing resistance, then you don't have friction, because it takes friction to make things move. So the resistance shows us that we're moving things along, right? But despite all of those challenges that really could have outweighed the assets, we centered student success. We centered diversity, equity, inclusivity, and belonging. We really leveraged our institutional mission, vision, and value statement that says we are the most inclusive institution of higher ed, which we have some work to do there, but we'll leverage that because it's an asset. And certainly weaving in faculty participation and shared governance. So even though we had a lot of challenges, the assets outweighed the challenges, and we were really able to persevere. So I'd love to pause here and just hear from some of you all. If your institution is considering a cultural competency graduation requirement, maybe what it looks like at your institution, and or some challenges that you've experienced along the way. And I can type those in as well.
I can move us along because maybe our next slide will also spur some more discussion. Okay, does your institution have a cultural competency graduation requirement? Is it one course or group of courses? Yeah, Abby, I don't know, maybe you want to talk about the minimum number of outcomes that had to be in that cultural competency designation to be in a class.
So we had a rubric for course inclusion, and it required a minimal score of 2. So of those 5 institutional learning outcomes, we needed 2 of the course learning outcomes to map up to 2 of the institutional learning outcomes.
And for students to be able to meet that as a graduation requirement, they just have to complete one of those courses that was in that list of 31 classes that we showed earlier. What kinds of resistance have you experienced? Some of that Abby described, but some of it is that public outward facing, you know, we're almost going too in depth with this was kind of the sentiment. Not really, and I think some of the resistance too comes from just not understanding oppression, marginalization, systemic racism. And so we're really having to have some vulnerability around that. And I think that's where some of that resistance comes from. I don't know if that answers, you know, exactly all the kinds of resistance that we've had, but a lot of it is about being vulnerable and recognizing and acknowledging where we have shortcomings with our students and in our community and across our institution. And that's why we're doing this work. And that's why it's important to have a cultural competency graduation requirement. Abby, you've been here longer and you probably experienced more of the resistance. I don't know if you have more to add on that question.
There's a question in the chat that speaks to this too. It's, you know, what is the constituency of our faculty? It's really problematic. We have 1% of color and we have 29% Latinx students for Hispanic serving institutions. So we need students to be able to see themselves in the classroom. And from the Misrepresentation documentary that I love, one of the quotes is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think that's really hard. And I think about that often in terms of our faculty. So we have a lot of work to do there. Yeah, Karla, if you want to bring it home, then we can open up to questions too.
Yeah, so as Abby described when we had that balance diagram, our student success is really what tipped the scale and is why we persevere through this. The processes and practices around teaching and learning that we implemented, we got through that very quickly and figured out a successful process. I'm happy to report that the faculty member who told me they hate assessment said they love this. That's when we showed them the questionnaire with those 4 reflective questions and the new process, they raved about it. And so for us, that's a win, you know, one person at a time, baby steps. That's what this takes sometimes. But we did find equity through assessment. Some other successes we have were just that we were able to have solid documentation around improvements in student learning, not just the data that sat over here and went in a vacuum, but we had discussions and documentation around that. increased sharing of what works and doesn't work, and learning from each other, and from our students too. We had improved integration of the cultural competency outcomes and the sub-outcomes. And I think having a cohort of faculty participate in this was really effective as well. I mean, I know it was intentional to have a cohort, but we also found that those faculty really got ideas from each other, and the work was done in a Canvas shell so that a lot of sharing could happen. And then it informed our instructional assessment practices. As I mentioned earlier, I came in mid-fall to Colorado Mountain College, and I've been trying to advance our assessment practices. And this was a great, for me, being in charge of assessment, a great way to see if this sort of a reflective process is going to work. So we're expanding that to other assessment protocols, like with our programs, with our gen ed classes, and hoping that this also helps us have more equity across more than just this cultural competency graduation requirement. And just to see the results on the back end, like Abby and I were like hitting refresh every time a response came in, because it was so exciting to see the responses from faculty and what they were finding from their assessment data. So just a lot of wins. And then we also were able to identify, you know, where we can make improvements, maybe how some of those reflective questions could be tweaked in the reporting process too. So we learned a lot from just a cohort of 15 faculty, and they're to be celebrated. They did a remarkable job of participating and contributing and kind of following the requests we had, like, we need you to do this online form in the next week, pretty much. And they gave it their all, and they're to be celebrated too. They did a great job in helping us figure this system out. Abby, I don't know if you'd like to add to it.
Yeah, I think that there was some faculty pride in this as well. Not only, you know, moving from assessment to box checking, but like a celebration of our students. And, you know, again, understanding that cultural competency is not an endpoint, but that progress, right? The comment from the faculty that students struggle with understanding these concepts, and moving from not understanding to understanding a little bit more is something that the faculty owned and feel really proud of and celebrated. And so I think that was part of the importance of their participation here too. It was, you know, for their own fulfillment, as well as, you know, there's a narrative here, and I'm sure it's not just at Colorado Mountain College, that assessments for higher learning commission are for credentialing and not for improvement. And we're really trying to change that narrative.
So I'll move us to our final slide. Questions, discussion. What are you working on? Do you have similar processes? I think we can all learn from each other. That's part of why we partake in these sort of seminars. So we'll open the floor. The chat. And some of you put, Quill, I see you have a diversity and global learning certificate, but it's not a graduation requirement. So is that a standalone certificate that students select into, or you offer that certificate after certain courses are completed? Or
yeah, it's a standalone certificate, but it's not counted as like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's like an option. It's like an optional thing. So it's not. It's something that like shows up on their transcript, right? But it's almost like a service, almost treated as like a service learning component, or like we have something called like great books. So students read a certain amount of books, they get a certificate for it off of like the book list. So it's not even like a certificate program. It's very much kind of like I believe there are also close to 30 plus courses that count towards it, and students just need 9 credits worth of those courses from that list to count towards the certificate. But we are hoping to make it more robust and be able to require a competency like this for graduation moving forward. So this has really been helpful to hear how you all have done that. So I feel like we have kind of the framework, but it's definitely not where we want it to be.
Yeah, and we're happy to help share resources and more documentation if you need to. I mean, we're all in this for our students and our communities, right? So Abby and I are happy to share if you want to reach out by email afterwards as well. Jamie, at Pueblo Community College, we also serve multiple communities via multiple campuses. How were you able to navigate the varying cultural needs, resources at your different campuses? I'll start with those reflective questions. They're kind of a one size fits all, yet have enough flexibility in them to allow for the different needs and resources at each campus. And I'll let Abby expand, but I think just from my perspective, kind of external to the Canvas shell and the work and training the faculty did, I think that was really important in making sure that everybody could kind of customize the classes and how that cultural competency requirement was met in the classes.
Yeah, I think to that question, it really was about curricular changes and less about kind of campus by campus needs and resources. It was more about kind of standardizing that curriculum across campuses. There's another comment in the chat. I really appreciate this presentation at CCD. We are developing this area. It's so helpful and reassuring to see we have made important steps along that timeline, and we have, sorry, my chat is getting funny there. We have great faculty leadership and engagement along the way. We haven't made intercultural literacy graduation. Okay, yeah, definitely. I think that celebrating our accomplishments, knowing that, no, you're fine. I just need to extend my chat. Knowing that, it's progress and we're moving forward, and we can do better, right? I think that there's the other takeaway, and Karla's sick of hearing this, but at the AAC&U conference on diversity, equity, and student success, one of the presenters said, we are not doing DEI, we are being DEI, and right, so there's no endpoint. It is iterative, it is ongoing, it is a lifetime, like Rachel said, cultural competency is a lifetime improvement. So I think that any step we're making along the way to improve student learning around diversity, equity, student success is progress. And there's more work to do, but it's progress.
And I don't think it necessarily has to be a graduation requirement. For us, having it as an ISLO is really valuable too. And then using those tools that are already available, AKA the value rubric on diversity and global global literacy. Is that the exact definition there? And I should mention, we're actually, we've just recently put together a task force to look at all of our institutional student learning outcomes, and we're looking at the AAC&U essential learning outcomes, just to make sure we're on the right track for our students and our communities, the needs in our communities for education too, to be able to confidently say, these are the things that a CMC graduate has learned when they get a credential from us, or even if it's a one semester course in a CTE program, we want to have confidence in what our students are walking away with and what they're learning from us. So we're visiting that, and we're trying to look at how we keep the cultural competency aspect in those, and maybe we keep that as one of our outcomes, but our mission and vision have evolved, and so we want to make sure that our learning outcomes stay current with the direction of our institution as well. And I think some of those tools that are out there, like I just met this morning with our biology department, and we were talking about the GT competencies that CDHE has, and how the value rubrics attached to those make it actually really easy for them to have a variety of assessments, which is a very good equity practice in their curriculum, and have a variety of assessments, but a common rubric to make sure they're all evaluating the outcome with common criteria or standardized criteria. So that's another approach to this too. It's a really good question. Other comments or questions? Or things that you're doing that we could learn from too?
I have a quick, just a comment about service learning, and service learning being such a rich, like a rich experience for folks to to get that cultural competence. I mean, how much more learning could you have if you weren't like immersed in a complete and total different environment, right? And doing some work, service learning in especially like marginalized communities, et cetera. But what I found is that it's super difficult to get the institution to buy on or to support service learning, almost to the degree of like negating it and making it so that it's not even something that is encouraged at all, because it's not a GT. And so I'm wondering, like, this is something I'm just like, yeah, this is one of the best ways to get people culturally, to have some cultural competence. I'm wondering if there's any kind of mechanism we could start to employ to try to encourage more service learning and being in community.
Great question. And I think, yes, I have an answer for that. It's just my perspective, because that's all I can speak from. But thanks to this workshop, this institute last year, Colorado Mountain College is part of the multi-institutional grant for teaching excellence and equity with Pikes Peak Community College around high impact practices. So again, like there's the curricular element, and that's these 31 courses. But beyond those 31 courses, we actually had 17 faculty who participated in the high impact practice training. And so service learning or public demonstration of information outside the classroom is a component of a high impact practice. And so we have 17 courses right now, some of which are on the cultural competency list and some of which are not, which I think is really exciting for us as a college, that have the service learning component embedded in an assignment in the class. So I think it's a great question, and it kind of addresses both the curricular, kind of where the curricular innovations can begin and end around these 31 courses, and where the opportunity to infuse more DEI can be beyond those 31 courses on the list, right? It doesn't begin and end there by any stretch of the imagination. And I think high impact practice is the way to leverage that. It's a great question. The other thing that it made me think of is we were approached by our study abroad programs, and they said, like, we understand that the course learning outcomes don't map up to the institutional learning outcomes, but we're talking about economics in, where are they going, Karla? they're going.
I want to say Rwanda or something, aren't they?
So they're talking about economics in Rwanda, and they want to know if this class can be counted as a cultural competency class because of the context of the content. And we're wrestling through that. We don't have a yes or no yet. They have to apply just like everyone else has to apply, but it's a great question, right? Like what if the context of these competencies occur outside of the classroom, right? Rachel, to your point, do we have the bandwidth to consider that? And again, we're creating this path as we're walking in, and I think there's opportunity for that as long as we can demonstrate it, right? As long as we can hold ourselves accountable to it. I think we're running low on time, but that's a great question, Rachel, and thanks for giving me my platform to talk about HIPS.
The other thing I could add to that too is the GT competencies use those value rubrics, and one of the outcomes is integrative knowledge, and I think service learning fits nicely under there too, and there are outcomes written just for that sort of activity, and if those can be built into the curriculum, I know there are the course learning outcomes that are part of the CCCS catalog, but looking beyond that and looking for rubrics where you can actually embed some of those outcomes into your curriculum and then have a way to measure it so that you can also justify to your institution, like, look, here's the outcome that we put in place and we're measuring it, and look at the great work that our students are doing. So sometimes assessment isn't just great in identifying gaps, but it can also help you have justification for why why you need more resources to expand and grow the things that you're doing really well and that are having a positive impact on students and really making the learning that they're doing impactful. Oh, that's cool. CCD has used its grant dollars to hire a culturally relevant HIPS coordinator as well. Awesome. Okay, well, I guess we can conclude. You have our contact information there if you have other questions or want to collaborate on anything. I think these sort of symposiums are great for that networking as well, which is, of course, I'm sure a lot of you joined too. So we really appreciate your time today, and especially to talk to you about such an important topic as equity and belonging for our students in Colorado.
All right, so I wanted just to step on to thank our guests here, Karla and Abby. This was awesome. Learned a lot. I love some of the dialogue that's been going on through here. And yes, I hope you all will keep the information and keep this conversation going. If there's no more last questions, we will call this a session. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.